Hello guys, thank you so much for joining in today. In this video we're going to be looking at how to connect to a database and do various database operations using Java application. So in previous video we looked at how to write a query, how to create table and all that stuff using a database ID, and to be precise we looked at pgadmin, and we also looked at a cloud database provider. We looked at Elephant SQL, and I showed you guys how to create a PG instance in Elephant SQL. So I'm gonna just the revision. So I'm gonna pull up here. This is the database we created in previous video, and basically these are the thing we did. Basically we created a few tables. We did update statement, we did insert statement, we did delete, and I also showed you guys how to do index, create index and stuff like that. So just to kind of recap, this is the ID we use for our database. And in this video precisely what we're going to do is we are going to do the same thing that we did in previous video, but in this video we are going to do all of that from our Java application, and I'm going to show you what are the things that you guys need in order to do that from your Java application. So let's go ahead and start by I don't know if you guys remember, events is the table we created last time. See, and I haven't touched this table after that, so let me see what we have in this table. So I wrote a small select from events query. So if I run that, so I have 3 events currently, and as you can see, fundraising for street children, awareness against phone scam, coffee with friends, and all of that. We have the event time, we also have event location. So that's a little bit of revision of what we did last time, and then I also showed you guys how to and where to put those connection string in your pgadmin so that you can connect to your database. So let me go ahead and minimize that. Now this is the Java application, and we are going to be running various SQL statement from our Java application. So let's go ahead and show you guys what we will be running. As you can see, I created a database operation class, and I have basically here implements runnable. Reason for that, if you guys can remember, so that I can add them in the list of runnable, and I can simply run every single runnable in my executors. So that was the whole purpose for that. And I'm going to minimize some of the functions so that I can show you guys what all these functions are trying to do here. So as you can see, we have the first one, select query normal. We're going to be running select. We got the update here, we got delete, and if you guys can see this one, right, I put a small comment there saying like, hey, this is going to throw in foreign key constraint, and I could have fixed it, but I decided to leave it there just to kind of show you guys that we have to be very careful when doing any operation with database, because things could go wrong, and every interaction to database should be handled very carefully, and every error, or in this case exception, we might get from those operations needs to be cached properly and do the operation that you usually want to do when any error happens. It could be the case that you want to roll back your whole transaction. In that case, all of your database operation needs to be inside transaction. We're not going to be looking at transaction in this video, but that is just an example. Another example could be that you might want to log in those error in some table, in database table, and then you might want to alert your support team or whatever is the requirement really. But this is, keep in mind that every time you connect to database, do some database operation from your application, you might want to handle those errors properly. So we have insert query here again, and at the end this is just basically a run operation because we are implementing runnable here, and then normal, logging, and then basically I'm running every single method in here, and then after I run, I basically see what have changed in those events table, and I'm printing those out. So here, I got the first events, I ran the insert here, and then I try to get the events again. I print those events, I ran update, and then I get the new setup events again, and then I print those events. I try to run delete. As you can see, this will throw in an exception, and then at the end again get events and print those there. That's pretty much the database operation. In order for us to be able to connect to database from our Java application, you need couple things. First thing, obviously, you need your database connection string. So here I have config.json file, and this file has my actual database connection string, which I'm not going to show you guys this time, but I also have another file, config-test.json file, and I'm going to open that up. So this is basically a JSON file here, and I have my database connection string here. Basically key value here, DB URL. You type in your JDBC, that's Postgres. It's because my database is Postgres. Database host basically will be your server IP, or if you have the domain name, and then port. If you decide to run it in default port, it will be default port. For our Elephant SQL, you guys, I showed you guys where to get those IP, host, and database name from. So you basically get those stuff from Elephant SQL and just basically replace those here. And then we have a database URL and database password. And that is all you need in order to connect to database. Let me tell you one more thing you need. Okay, this is the connection string, right? Another thing you need is a Jdbc driver. So what Jdbc driver is, it stands for Java Database Connectivity. Every database vendor has those Jdbc driver. What Jdbc driver does is it unifies the various different kind of operation among different vendors, and give you a one normalized API with your database. So if you're using PostgreSQL, you need a Postgres Jdbc driver. If you're using SQL, let's say a SQL Server, you would need a Microsoft SQL driver. So I went ahead and added that dependency for Jdbc driver, and since I'm using Postgres, this is my dependency for my Postgres Jdbc driver. Now we already have a Jdbc driver and connection string, and that means we are ready to go ahead and kind of run this application. Before do that, I'm going to show you a couple more things here. I created an object called config, and as you can see, if this config object looks very much like our config-test.json file. The reason for that is we are taking this file and creating a config object out of that. Basically, that's all it is. And then configuration class, which holds a config object, and config object has our database URL, database username, and database password. And in that configuration class, we have getDBConnection class method, which is static. And then as you can see in this method, I'm first basically initializing our config object, and if we go inside there, this is why it makes it lazy, because we are only initializing this object if it's null. So it will only happen the very first time, and then the subsequent request we're gonna utilize the one we already initialized. So again, we're using a JSON. JSON is a Google library for serializing and deserializing JSON file to Java objects. So basically, if you look at here, I'm telling application that, hey, go to config folder, and in that config folder right here, I have config.json file. So, this config folder right here. So basically saying go to config folder In there I have config.json file. Read the file and basically translate that to my config.class, and which is going to be this, which has a DB URL, database username, and database password. If we go back to config class here, once we have that, basically it will return that config object back to the calling place, so which will be here. So we'll have a config here, and this is again, this is straight from JDBC. So I have a comment here. The driver manager can also take properly formatted URL, like which is true. Basically, if you don't want to type in pass in this various argument like this, you can also pass in a one big string, which we call connection string, which have everything, including your database user name and database password. So anyway, basically with JDBC, this is how you create a SQL connection. You driver manager get connection, you pass in your database URL, your username, and password. And this function, get DB connection, we have used this function everywhere whenever we needed to do any database operation. So let's go ahead and show you guys where are those places. Obviously that is going to be our database operation class here. So let's go ahead and look at all this function from top to down. Alright, on get events, basically I'm printing out saying like, hey, I'm getting events, and this is the query very first time. And then I also have this list of event object initialized, which has a ID, event name, event time, and event location. The reason I did that here, basically I'm grabbing those return results from database, and then basically I'm creating an object out of those various columns, and this object going to be event object right here, and it also has ID, event name, event time, and event location. And I'm printing that object out so that I can see what is happening to those database record. So let's go ahead and jump in here. Basically connection configuration, get DB connection, we already went over this function. This will basically check if it has a config object already initialized. If it doesn't, then it will initialize a config object from our configuration file up here, and then it will take that config object and create a SQL connection using driver manager, and it will return that connection back here. And then this is a statement object. You basically, whenever you run select query, you initialize statement with connection.create statement, and then now you got connection, you got statement created out of the connection, and now you basically, what you do, you write a query and then you run statement.execute query, and this will return you a result set. And result set is a iterable, so you can iterate result set and then kind of go through all of those records that you retrieve from database. So here again, once I run that, basically while loop to iterate over all of my result set, and then I'm here, rs is result set, get long is column label is ID. So I'm basically, if you can see these things matches, I'm basically saying, hey, get me this column, and then basically give me the long value, and then hold that in event ID. Doing the same for event name, event time. As you can see, event time here is a date, right? So, and I'm also asking for get date here, and that kind of matches. And I have event location, and at the end I'm initializing a normal constructor for events, and I'm basically setting those value and also adding them in my list, and eventually I'm returning that. So basically that's how retrieving events from database works. We're obviously going to run this here in a minute, but I'm going to go over other function I have here. We got update here, same thing, printing out saying like we are updating event, and then here based on what event ID we get, and then what new event location we get, we are going to be updating the event location for that ID. One thing slightly different here is that I'm using prepare statement. Prepare statement is necessary in order to avoid SQL injection. So don't try to write your query with a bunch of string concatenated. Instead, use those question mark, which will be replaced later by just using prepare statement. So here again, connection, rather than we are using statement, we are using prepare statement because we have some parameter that we want to pass in here. So, and then basically here, since it's going to update a existing record, I'm saying, hey, return generated keys. This will usually, what it does is it will return the updated or impacted record ID. So that, and then on that prepare statement, you can do set string new event location. So your setting for this event location would be new event location, and then for ID here, again another question mark, it would be a event ID that got passed into this function, and eventually will execute update. If you look at the different, initially for the select we have execute query, here we have execute update, and if anything goes wrong, I'm simply here logging, but in a production environment you want to do something different. Maybe you want to log into some error table, send an email or alert to your support team, or roll back a previous transaction or operation. It really depends on the business need. And eventually, if everything goes well, I am returning the affected row ID. That's there. Delete events, let's go ahead and look at that. Pretty much the same. Again, we are using prepare statement. Reason for that, we don't want to run into any SQL injection. So basically, I even put a comment here saying use prepare statement to avoid SQL injection. And so it is very important to use prepare statement. Otherwise, if user are able to trick your application and pass in something that will impact more than more than the records you really wanted to impact, and it would be very catastrophic. So prepare statement, very important. Again, here you can see parameter index, basically saying like first one means first question mark. If I go up here, update, you'll see 1 and 2, because 1 for first question mark and 2 for second question mark. That's all it means. And then again, execute update, because it is going to update. It's not just read only, it is going to update the record there. And then I have the insert, very normal, insert into table with name, time, and location. And again, I'm using prepare statement, and that's a good practice because we don't want any SQL injection here. And if you look at here, event time is local date, and I am basically taking that local date and basically changing that to SQL date, because in Jdbc you do need SQL date in order for date operation. So we have the very handy function date.valueOf in our java.sql.date class, and then that will take a local date time object and translate that to a SQL date. And again, execute update, because it is going to update the record. At the end, there's also execute update, execute batch for batch insert. You can look it up, it's pretty straightforward. You'll find documentation on Postgres Jdbc Driver page, or simply Google it. But there is also a batch, execute batch for batch insert. At the end, again, we are trying to find a primary key of a recently inserted record, and then basically returning that. So let's I went over very quickly, so let's go ahead and run this, and I will show you guys everything. So before that, I'm going to show you guys this. This is our current state of, let's see, events table. So I'm going to run that again. So we have 3 record, fundraising for street children, awareness against phone scam, coffee with friends. And I'm going to keep this here, and then and I'm going to show you the change updated once I run the application. So let's go ahead and run the application here. Again, I mentioned that I commented out here this new file writer and new file reader because we already went over those. So let's go ahead and run this, and this time it's only going to run database operation. So I'm going to run it. It's thinking about it. Okay, running database operation, getting events. So first time getting events, this is our select operation. So as you can see, 1, 2, 3, we got 3 events, and then it says inserting events, right? Once it is inserted event, we're trying to get events again, and in this case we have 4 events, and this is the events that we just inserted, right? Courier, fare, event time, event location. And then we have updating event. We're just updating events, so we will have the same number of events. So we have 4 events again here, including this guy here. We have 4 events. And then if you look at the difference, really, we have updated event 1. And then the reason for that is event 1 had event location as 123 Edmond OK 73034. Now it has new event location. Basically it has a new city in new town. So that worked out. And in order for us to verify that, if we go up here and look at the run method, right? When we insert, we have the courier fare as an insert event name, current time as event time, and then location Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And then we're getting events, printing that again, and then we updated event 1, and where we updated new event location, and we set that to new event location. And delete, we talked about this is going to fail, and then since this operation failed, there would be no difference between this events and this event, but I still went ahead and printed out. So if you want to see it, same thing, 4 events. And that's pretty much for this video here. And now just to kind of wrap it up, as you see, we have 3 events, right? When we got 1, 2, 3 Edmond OK 73034 for event 1 location. If I run this again here, we have 4 events. We have courier fare. This event is something we inserted, and this is the value we updated. So that would be how you do a database operation from Java application. I showed an example for Postgres. Obviously, I used free Elephant SQL. You can do that with any SQL vendor, database vendor you have, but keep in mind that based on vendors, you do need different Jdbc driver. And pretty much everything else would be the same. Another thing to keep in mind that I did mention this many times, always use prepared statement, because it's very important to avoid SQL injection, and you don't want to create a query by concatenating string. Rather just use a question mark and use proper prepared statement. And another thing would be catch all the error, SQL exception, kind of thing that you get from operating, interacting with database, and then properly log them, or do whatever that needs to be done based on the business. That's it for this video. I'm very excited. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me. If you like this video, please go ahead and subscribe the channel, and also press that thumbs up, and it will help me a lot and motivate me to make new videos. In the next episode, in the next video, we're going to be looking at data visualization, and I'm going to show you guys how to visualize some of the data, and again using Java. So until then, keep learning, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much.